Hey, what's up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to answer a question that I have been recently asked. It is something that I have touched on in the past in another video, but not as in depth as I will in this one. And that question was basically what my thoughts are as to why the United States has the largest prison population, and if there is anything to do with racism when it comes to the answer to that. So it's a very good question. I always encourage people, to ask these type questions and think about these type issues, social issues. And it's a very complex situation. But I am going to give you guys my absolute truth as to what I believe it is. And this comes from my own research, years and years of study. I've read over maybe 3,000 books, observation, interactions, travel, experiencing different cultures, and having gone through the jail and prison system starting from a very young age. So I have a very broad perspective of information in order to answer such a question. So I hope you guys respect that and realize that I'm not just talking shit here. Okay, so the first point that I'd like to make is one that is not very well received by a lot of Americans, particularly white Americans. And that point is that even though black people who were slaves were freed through the Emancipation Proclamation Act, they were technically still not freed because they were not given anything. Okay? They had been held in bondage and had been very badly damaged psychologically, emotionally, physically, and then just let go to wander freely and figure things out. And they were told, just work hard, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and everything will be fine. That's bullshit. It's similar to, though not anywhere near as severe, meaning the slave situation was much more severe than the prison situation now, where people do long bids and they get released. A lot of these people are getting released from solitary confinement conditions. They're not mentally well. They're not able to socialize, and they're just let out, taken to the bus stop, dropped off, have a nice life. How do you recover from that? And compare that to the slave issue, and you'll realize that that was a very, very crucial factor in what I'm about to follow up with. So the main point and justification for the slavery was twofold. First, it was that many people, even a majority, I would say, viewed black people as inferior to them. They did not view them as human beings. They viewed them as things. So when you look at something and identify it as a thing, even generations later, there are still people who will never be able to view a black person as an equal to them. So the sentiment lingers still after all this time. But it was that aspect, and the other point was about the free labor. They needed it. That's how they built this country. They built this country by using slaves, not just black slaves, Chinese slaves, others as well. That's how they built this thing. It wasn't built through democracy. It wasn't built through, paying livable wages. It was built through brutality, murder, and fucking slaving people. That's what it was. So even though many of them felt forced and were unwilling but had no choice to go along with this Emancipation Proclamation Act and free the slaves, in their hearts they didn't want that shit. They didn't believe that was the right thing to do. They still looked at these guys as niggers. That was it. You're still a fucking nigger. I don't give a fuck what the law says. So what did they do to counteract, to counterbalance the loss of the free labor? And the answer is they created this industrial prison complex. They started creating prisons and building all over the nation prisons, and then following that up by creating laws that really made no sense. Laws that put people away for things that they should not have been put away for. For those of you who have followed my videos or who know of me, you've probably heard me say in the past, in my opinion, in my mind, there can be no crime if there is no victim. Okay? So if you can't point to a victim directly or a group of people who are victims and show how they've been harmed, there's not a crime. So if you apply that logic to the drug laws, you realize that those drug laws are the number one thing that this nation's government and elite rely on to continue to get this free slave labor. So for those of you that have never been to jails or prisons, you may not even know this. But don't fucking think for a second that you're going to go there and just chill out and not do anything. You're forced to work. In some places, if you don't, they will fuck you up and beat you. In most places, if you don't, they'll just put you in lockup, solitary confinement, remove all of your privileges. No rec, no fuck. You get a shower once a week, no visits, no phone call. They'll keep all your mail. They'll give you nothing. You'll be in a fucking cage in your underwear, freezing in the winter and burning in the summer. And you go crazy in there. So the majority of people accept that they have to work. There were laws passed decades ago where the prisons were forced to pay for the labor. Now, in this country, we have what are called minimum wage laws. They're often spoken about in political arenas. Minimum wage on average, I would say, in this nation is probably close to even $10 now per hour of work. In prison, you're lucky if you make $2 a day. A day. The best fucking jobs in the prisons that I know of that you need to be connected with the guards to get. You need to be white usually, and you need to have been down for at least 10 years to get. Maybe pay $5 to $6 per day. That's the highest I've ever fucking heard of. When the law for the rest of the country is more than that per hour. So it's slave labor. And there are millions of people incarcerated right now in this country who are subjected to that slave labor. They are forced to work. So it's a huge part of the economy that is never spoken about. It's not spoken about. And that is the primary reason why they have these stupid fucking drug laws. How the fuck can you put me in prison for possessing in my pocket a plant, for example, a bag of weed, something that God created from the earth? Who the fuck are you to tell me that I can't have that or can't consume it? Even if it's fucking heroin. It shouldn't be a crime for me to use or possess any drug. The crime part comes in if my using that drug puts me in a situation or alters my reality to a point where I actually commit a crime, where there's a victim, where I harm someone, I rob someone, I shoot and kill, murder, then. But before that, think of how insane it is for any fucking people to take otherwise good citizens and put them in fucking cages like animals over possessing something or consuming or ingesting something. My bottom line to that is, who the fuck are you to tell me or anybody else what we can do with our bodies? This is my body, not yours. You do what the fuck you want with yours. Don't dare tell me what to do with mine. So they make no sense. And it's important that you guys understand that this is not about protecting people. This is not about fucking saving lives. This is about continuing the cycle of slave labor, basically free labor. That's what it's about. That's why there are more and more jails and prisons being built in this country than there are schools. That's why, on average, okay, a prisoner contractually is worth more than a student in the free world. I've also said this before. It's a crazy thing I realized working with these kids in Newark in the jail when I was a volunteer there, as a mentor for years, trying to help these kids. And I realized these kids on the street, nobody gives a fuck about them. They're not worth anything. And they were mostly black kids. They were worth zero. Society put a value on them of zero or even negative. They were never to be considered an asset, but a liability. The way the people thought of them is these people are troublemakers and costing us money. But the second you put them in that fucking cage and sentence them to more than 365 days, which will send them to a prison rather than a county jail, they're worth between $50,000 and $60,000 per year, guaranteed by the government to that institution. Most of which now are privately owned. And it's important that you understand the difference between privately owned and not. The main point of it, the short of it is, when anything like that is privately owned, they are going to cost cut in every fucking way possible and make those prisoners live on the absolute bare minimum that they are allowed by law. So that's what this is about. Like most things in our world, it's about money and power and control. I'm not saying that everybody's racist. I'm not saying that all white people are aware of this and there's some big conspiracy, to make these things happen. But you better fucking believe that this is the truth. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you're a part of it or not, this is the fucking reality we live in. And this is what's happening. And it's a very sad thing because it's destroying our country. So in addition to poverty, which is a huge factor, you include the race thing, you include the free slave labor that the nation lost, and you include that racism that still exists in a lot of people, and you start understanding the bigger picture of why things are the way they are. Why would we, that many call the greatest nation in the world, have the highest prison population by far? Why? What is wrong with us? These are just some points that I'm touching on here today. There are other many more complicated and in-depth points as well. There has been a concentrated effort to keep not only blacks but other minorities down and preventing them from ever obtaining any kind of real power or wealth. That's a fact. The white people, there are no white people alive today who have ever owned a slave. There are no black people alive today who have ever been a slave. But deep down in their hearts, on both sides, there's still some effect of the things that happened in the past. In the case of the black people, a lot of them suffer from an inferiority complex, where from when the time they're very little, they start realizing and start hearing these things and start seeing these things where white is good, black is bad. Even in religion, the depiction of Jesus Christ you see is of a white man. How the fuck is Jesus going to be white with blue eyes when he's in the Middle East? He's a Middle Easterner. He's closer to an African than to a fucking white person. Even the descriptions of the Bible, in the Bible of him, don't depict him as shown in the images. So black people have been programmed, and as a result of them having their entire history and culture and language, names, everything taken from them, the time that passed, the things they went through, they're a fucked up people. It's not easy to recover from that. But in addition to that, for them and other minorities, the powers that be go out of their way to keep them down. They go out of their way to not afford them the same opportunities that they do for themselves and their families. It's very simple. I wish this were not true, but this is the truth. So, what are some solutions to this? I'll give you some thoughts of mine as solutions, but unfortunately I know they'll never happen. Because at the end of the day, nobody really gives a fuck. Nobody wants anything to really change. The people who have the ability to change it, they don't want it to change. They just say whatever bullshit they have to make you guys shut the fuck up and continue to vote for them and keep paying your taxes. They don't want to help anybody. They only want to help themselves. But some solutions are: first, we need to re-educate the entire police force and how they deal with people. I know a lot of people don't like this kind of conversation and say that I'm exaggerating or it's not true. Bullshit. Even to me, I'm not a black person, but I know how it feels to be one in a sense, because even to me, there's a very big fucking difference between my interactions with police and a white person. A clean-cut white boy who's the same age as me, in the same situation as me. Just my name alone and the way I look will change that interaction. And for the black person, it's much worse. Much worse. So the re-education of police across the nation is a start. Education of these impoverished areas, people, is crucial. Why are these schools in these shitty ass areas that are predominantly black and minority all shit? Why? Simple. It's money. They could change that shit. They could pay and change and provide better education, better housing, better business opportunities, more accessible loans. They could do all this shit like this. But they don't want to do it. It costs them nothing, technically, to free the slaves and say, hey, okay, you're free because of what I just mentioned before. They just re-enslaved them and called it something else. Many of them. But to make real change to help people, it's going to cost a lot of money. They don't want to do that shit. And they're also, I missed the point I was making earlier about how both the black and white are still affected. I spoke about how the blacks are, but I forgot to mention how the whites are. The whites are still affected by this. these things that happened hundreds of years ago, in the sense that not only do some of them still continue to have racist feelings towards blacks and others who are unlike them, but they also have something called white guilt, where deep down inside of them, they know that their ancestors fucked up. Their ancestors were pieces of shits for what they did. They brutalized people. So in some sense, because of the bloodline, they feel some guilt of that. So these are the still existing consequences of this whole slavery thing. And that's not the whole point of this video. I've spoken a lot about it, but it's important that we discuss this because it's a huge factor. So we need to fix the schools, but we also need to incentivize good behavior. In this country, they did the opposite, to continue to hold these minority people down. It was under Lyndon B. Johnson who started this welfare program, where they basically laid it out in a way so as to allow for the welfare recipients, the people in need of help, to get more help if they remove the male from the household. So if you had a couple who had multiple children, they were going to be given X amount of dollars in welfare. But if you remove the husband, get him out of there, and leave the women with the children alone, she would get more. And the people fell for it. It was a fucking trap. They fell for it, and as a result, now, decades later, you can see the consequence. The majority of black children born in this country today, I don't know the exact number, but I put it at somewhere around 75 fucking %, are born out of wedlock. The majority are raised without a father figure. That's fucking up so much in itself. So we need to reverse that and incentivize the opposite, the good behavior. We'll give you more if you're married or if you have a two-parent household. We will give you more help. We want that. We will give you more help if you're a student as well as someone who works. Incentivize good behavior, not bad. Remove all fucking drug laws completely. That's what I would do. Completely. They'd never do that because that would wipe out the majority of the whole prison population and billions of dollars of free labor. To touch back on that point again, one thing I wanted to mention as well is it's not just the free labor that's of value to them. When you're in this system, okay, they are fucking robbing you blind in ways that many of you who have never endured that would ever think of. For example, when I was in jails and prisons, I would call my girl a lot. I'd be on that phone a lot. She would be the one that helped me keep my sanity. Sometimes she'd be the one that stopped me from stabbing a motherfucker in his throat and ripping his shit up. I needed those phone calls. But for me, on average, my phone bill, on average, was over $1,000 a month. Think about that. Think about how much that is. And it's not because I was talking ridiculous amounts of time. If I was in the free world, I can get a basic plan for $50 a month that would have covered all of that. But they're robbing us there. Then they're selling us commissary or canteen. And they're charging us ridiculous prices. They've marked up these prices so much, and there's no other option. You can't buy anything else from anywhere else. There's no competitor. They've monopolized it. They're making a killing on it. A killing. And they're getting these guarantees of monies from the government as well. Those guarantees of money also have stipulations in those contracts where the prisons are required to maintain a certain level of occupancy, a high level, usually 80% or above, in order for them to continue to be eligible to get this kind of money. So everybody's in on it together. The lawmakers, the politicians, the cops, the prisons, the prison owners, the correctional officers, everybody on the government side is in on this shit together. The owners of those companies that sell these products. It's all a big fucking scam. And it generates billions and billions of dollars. And that's the reason why I don't think any real change will ever happen. I'm only one person, and I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who the fuck I am, aside from people around my area, people who knew me from before, the few of you who know me here. But if we come together collectively, and there are enough of us who are knowledgeable, who are well-spoken, who have a strong enough presence, and the most important fucking thing, the bravery and the courage and the willingness to stand the fuck up and demand change. Change will never happen. It will never, ever happen. Things for blacks and minorities in this country today are much, much worse than they were even 60, 70 years ago. In the 1950s, in the mid-1950s, black people, on average, lived much better than they do today. So we are not progressing in that sense. And again, guys, this whole video is not supposed to have been about race and slavery and this, but this is something that is such a big part of the picture that I don't hear spoken of. And I want people to know these things. It's important to understand these things. There are a lot of bad people from every culture and every race. I never make excuses for crimes, especially violent crimes. So when black people fuck up, I'm the first one to hold them accountable and say, listen, no matter what the fuck your excuse was, no matter how bad shit was, you fucked up and you fucking knew you were doing it. But at the same time, when you see the big picture and realize that there actually is and has been a concentrated effort to keep these people down and fucked up, then you have to have a change of feeling towards the situation in some way. You have to. Because if it were you or your family, you definitely have a problem with the way things are. So I'm going to wrap this video up, guys. I know a lot of you may not agree with these things that I'm saying. Right? I'm not a racist person in any way. But at a time in my life, I was. Due to circumstances and due to shit that happened. Especially in jails, where things were segregated and I saw and I was made to believe that it was because of race, differences in race. And I have no problem saying that. There was a time I had a big fucking problem with black people. But it was only in my immaturity and lack of knowledge and understanding and study and research and understanding history. Not as it's taught to us in this bullshit educational curriculum, but as it actually happened. And learning to put myself in the place of others, empathy, that I changed. And I realized that that's the stupidest thing to be, is a racist in any way towards anybody. Now I'm the opposite. I probably help more black people than I do any other race. And it doesn't mean anything. I'll help whoever I can help. But when it comes to the prison population thing, guys, I know I've spoken for a long time in this video, and I can continue on for much longer, but I'm going to cut it short and I'm going to end. It does have a lot to do with race. All right? That's the unfortunate reality. You may not like it, but that's what the fuck it is. So please share your thoughts. Please, if you disagree with me, don't talk shit to me. Don't insult me. Don't attack my character. Don't talk about the way I look, that you don't like the way I talk, or you don't like that I wear glasses. Bullshit. Please, don't do that. For people who waste my fucking time and make dumbass comments, I'm just going to fucking ban you and get the fuck out of here. I don't have time for that shit. But if you really have some insight, and if you really have some valid points of either agreement or disagreement, please share them, because I do read the comments, and I am interested, and I want the dialogue, because the dialogue is the only way to actually ever change anything. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks.